You're listening to the Empowering Process podcast with your host, Gail Kraft. Listen as she holds frank discussions around how your purpose, being present, and trusting your power impacts your life. Whether you're an entrepreneur, leader, or developing your vision, you'll find wisdom and insights you can utilize right now. Welcome your host, Gail Kraft.
Hi, everybody. Gail Kraft here with the Empowering Process podcast. And I have with me this really amazing woman. We're going to have quite a discussion. Her name is Patty Block. Patty helps women business owners who are experts in their field fine-tune their operations and scale their revenue for strategic growth so they can generate more revenue and less stress. We're all about more revenue and less stress, right? And we're going to talk about the things that happen in our life that were challenges. And through navigating those challenges, we feel we're stronger, we're wiser, we have different perspectives. And Patty, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you. I appreciate you inviting me, and I'm glad to be here.
It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. So, and we had zero preparation, and which is typically what I do. And so what we are going to talk about is what comes up. And for some reason, I started to think about some of the first earlier challenges in my life. So we're talking childhood traumas, right? And a lot of those anchor in and set in before the age of 7. Right. And then we don't even realize they have them. So I'm going to talk about one in particular that honestly, I didn't even realize that I had the trauma with me until I would say maybe 5 years ago. It happened at the age of 3. And at the age of 3, my mom passed. She went to work and never came back. And I had a recurring nightmare about that situation where her and I we'd go down to the train station. I would get on the train and the doors would close and she'd still be on the platform. And I would be on the train and I couldn't get off because I only knew how to get to downtown Boston. Right? And I had to stay on that train, going through the tunnels and everything, getting off there and knowing how to come back. And when I came back, she was no longer on the platform. And I had this dream. Oh my God, I would wake up in tears and in sweats until about the age of 12 or 13. And that's the age when puberty sets in, we start to really suppress things, right? And I just totally forgot that I even had that dream. And I can remember as a young adult, someone one time saying to me, "You must have abandonment issues over your mom passing at such a young age." And I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about. No." Wrong, right? But at that point in time, that's how deeply I had buried that situation. A few years ago, and I mean just recently, I actually had that come up because as we peel the onion of what blocks us, the deep stuff starts to bubble up to the surface. And when I was able to have that conversation with my mom, about what happened, letting that go made a complete shift in my life. It changed how I relate to people. It relieved any anger that I had, especially with sisters, right? It was part of my sisterhood wounds that I caused, right? It changed my relationship with men. I'm more on a friendly and sisterly and caring and loving level than I ever was before. It shifted so much because I was able to have the conversation with her about how I felt and how she felt and letting it go. So yes, it didn't kill me, but it sure made me suffer for a long time. And when I finally faced it, it was a godsend. And so making me stronger, it didn't make me a stronger bitch. I was always that, right? It made me more vulnerable in a way that I'm not, with that kind of hurt healing, the next hurt isn't going to be that deep because I know how to heal. So you learn how to navigate your pain, you learn how to heal. And so I'd love to talk with you, Patty, about, we talked a little bit about divorce and how painful that can be, and just life experiences in general, about some of the things that have happened in your life that you learned how to navigate through, and you became an even better person because of it.
Sure. Your story about your mom's death, your dream, how deep you buried that memory really resonates with me, because I also had childhood traumas that I didn't recognize as traumas until I was an adult. I was probably in my 40s before I started to realize and call those situations traumas. And one of the things that a therapist shared with me early in my journey was not so much what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, although I do believe that. It was more about, you will get through this. I can share with you ways to cope. And when you get through this, it will make you stronger and you'll learn from it. As long as you keep that understanding that there is something to be learned here, and not just to be bitter and angry. And, some of the emotions that you felt, I've certainly felt. And my situation with my divorce, I didn't really think of that as a trauma until 20 years later. And it wasn't the event of the divorce that was the trauma. It was the aftermath. It was a surprise divorce for me. I was very caught off guard. There had been issues in our marriage, but my belief was, we'll work through them and we'll go to a therapist and we'll get help. So I always thought that we would work through, and I was realistic. I knew that there were issues in a marriage all the time. What I didn't realize is that my goal and my ex-husband's goals were different. And I didn't realize that until I got into therapy and realized the reason he was willing to go to therapy was because he was afraid to tell me that he wanted out of the marriage, and he wanted the therapist to do that. Once I realized that dynamic and that we had different goals, he never planned to reconcile. And I couldn't imagine any other path forward. So once I realized that, then I could make some decisions. I filed for divorce and we moved forward. Unfortunately, that wasn't the end of the story, because we were back in court over and over and over. Eventually, there was no child support. There's no alimony in Texas at that time. And I had 3 little kids. So I realized very quickly that I was on my own financially, emotionally, logistically. It was all me. And my kids were little. At that time, my youngest was not even 3. And he's now turning 30. So I raised the kids myself. I got them all through college and graduate school, helped them start their careers. And then now they all 3 own businesses. So I'm super proud of them. I serve as their informal business advisor, and they also help me in my company. So the outcome of that, I learned a tremendous amount, certainly about myself, and about the tools that I needed in order to cope and in order to help my kids grow into good human beings, because that was always my goal.
Right. And I think having a goal that is outside of yourself, I don't want to sound Simon Sinek-y, but I will, because it holds true in life as well as in business. Understanding why you do things is huge. And if the why is personal, you're probably not going to do it. But if the why is external, so for me, when I divorced, I had a 1.5-year-old that I needed to support, and I wanted to not be on welfare. I wanted her to have a good home. I wanted her to have more than that was going to provide for her, along with a little bit of pride. And so I went to work, and I rose to the top. It was unbelievable how much money I was making in a very short period of time, because I was always focused on, she needs this, she needs that, she needs this. I need to do more for her, whether or not that translated to her or not, didn't matter. It was my driving force, right?
Yes. And in fact, at the time of my divorce, I had a business as a political consultant and a lobbyist. And I quickly realized after 8 years of building that business, I needed to close that business and get a job, because otherwise I wouldn't have health insurance for my kids. So there was a grieving process for my marriage. There was a grieving process for all the changes in my life, and a grieving process for having to close my business. And the main issue there was that the lobbying required a lot of travel. So I knew that I needed to be home to stabilize things for my kids, and closed my business, got a job. It was a great opportunity for me. And much like you said, I was making more money. I had great benefits. There was no travel. So it was very stabilizing for me. And I went to a nonprofit organization that was an international school and became director of operations there. So that whole experience helped me determine, when I started this company, that I wanted to be that resource for other women business owners, but I also wanted to bring my experience in finance and operations to the small business market. So every step of my journey has led me here. And so when you talk about what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, it also makes you wiser. And you build your toolkit, your emotional toolkit, and even logistical. I mean, I learned so many things about how to manage my time and my energy, and how to deal with 3 little people who needed me to meet their needs, and each of their needs was different. So all of those challenges led me to where I am, and where I am is fabulous.
Isn't that
So
amazing?
yeah, so do I wish my journey had been different? Yes, I wish it had been less painful. I wish it had had less of a profound effect on my kids. But on the other hand, I am where I am, and I'm really happy to be here.
I, from time to time, go through that thought process of, well, it would have been nice if this didn't happen, right? And then I remember the gift and the lesson from that experience, like, well, how else would I have gotten that? All right. So, and then it would have been nice if this didn't happen. Well, then I wouldn't have taken that choice, right? And so this little zigzaggy path that we take through life, it's almost, to me, like your body or your subconscious or God, whatever you believe in, is saying, okay, you need now to go left a little bit, go left. Oh, no, too far left, go right, go right. Oh, too far right, go right. It's kind of giving us a nudge. And if you're anything like me, you don't hear the nudge, right? And so then you get a little shove, and then you get a push. And I've said, and the brick wall, sometimes I have to be pushed through the brick wall. Sometimes I go, oh, right, you've been telling me that for a very long time. I get it now. Thank you. So in my wish, my mantra, my desire, my purpose, if you will, is listen to the nudge. Listen to the nudge. Right? Because I don't need the brick wall if I just listen to the nudge, and that the shifts that we have, the course corrections that we need to make, aren't as severe. Now, does life happen? Bad things happen to good people. There's a whole book on that, right? Bad things happen. Being a good person does not preclude that, right? Learning your lessons doesn't preclude that. But what happens when you learn to gather these tools and you learn those emotional lessons is that when these bad things happen, you're not thrown off course for so long, right? And you're able to stop and say, oh, I recognize this pain. And I realized I lived through this pain. How did I do that? Right, I remember. I'm going to go do that again. Right? So that's interesting. And so how do you use this with some of the clients that you work with?
I think there are two really important aspects to learning from trauma, learning from bad experiences, is context and perspective. And that is something that I bring to my clients. So to give you an example, I'm working on a book and I attended a book boot camp that my book coach was putting on. And during that, what I realized after those 2 days was it gave me context for how to use my book, how to approach writing my book. So there were a lot of elements and I was missing that context. Well, that's very much what I do with my clients. They have this general goal. They know they want their business to be doing better. It's doing well. I work with experts in their field, so a lot of accountants, attorneys, engineers. So they are doing very well in providing their services and bringing in clients, but they don't feel very confident or competent when it comes to running their businesses and understanding their financials and streamlining operations, being as efficient as they can be. So all of those things are things we work on, and I help them understand the context in which they can regain their joy. And what I mean by that is sometimes our businesses feel like a burden, and we're embarrassed to say anything about that because we feel so grateful. We're our own boss. We get to set our own schedule. We get to pick who we want to work with. So we don't want to complain about things that we may be feeling. But I will say that a lot of that is very pervasive among women business owners. So when I was growing up, my mom used to make these fabulous cookies. The whole house smelled good. It was warm. The cookies were gooey, kind of makes your mouth water.
I know, like I want a cookie.
Exactly. And my whole life, I watched my mom eat the broken cookies. But it wasn't until I was a teenager that I even thought to ask her, why do you only eat the broken cookies? Do they taste better? And she laughed and said, no, I eat the broken cookies so you can have the whole ones. And not too long ago, I saw this really startling statistic. 62% of women rely on their business for their primary income. 88% of those businesses bring in less than $100,000 a year. And it kind of hit me in terms of connecting the dots, that spirit of self-sacrifice that I witnessed with my mom, that many of us have seen with our mothers, our grandmothers, feeling as though that self-sacrifice is what we have to lead with, that issue almost creates an artificial glass ceiling for us in our businesses because we think we can't serve others and still make a lot of money. So context to help women business owners understand, yes, you can. You can serve others. In fact, you can do it better when you're bringing in more revenue. So giving them that context is an important aspect and perspective. So when we get really frustrated in our businesses, which of course we all do, and we all deal with all kinds of roadblocks, the thing to remember is, especially with the world situation the way it is, that in most cases, unless you're a surgeon, it's not a life or death situation. And so having that perspective of, yes, this is a problem. I've dealt with other problems before, very much what you said a minute ago, Gail. I've dealt with other problems. I have tools in my toolbox. I know how to cope with this situation. Yes, it's disappointing. Yes, it hurts my feelings. And I can learn from it. And it's really hard to keep that perspective all the time. It's what I talk about, that difference and that kind of tipping point between being an optimist and being a realist. I like to think that I'm both, but it's hard.
You're a realistic optimist.
Exactly. Because the optimism, it's not make-believe, right? The optimism that I feel is because I can make things happen and I can help my clients make things happen and make the right things happen at the right time so that they're going in the direction they want to get the result they want. And again, that's about context and it's about perspective.
Right. So I'm like, tools are like flying through my head as you're talking, situations are flying through my mind. Yes, 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 yes. So I used to be a Six Sigma green belt working for one of the large organizations nationally. And one of the tools that we would use has a grid. And one of the questions is, what is the potential of the impact? And if it's a 10, that means people die. If it's a 9, it might be a system failure. So it's very specific questions that you ask, and it's mathematical because everything is math, right? And when you ask your series and then your questions and you put it together, the formula you come up with tells you whether or not this is a big enough problem to waste your resources on to fix in a company, right? And I used that one time for a company that did not want me to bring my Six Sigma tools into the company. So they didn't know that I was asking these questions, and I was asking individuals and not the team. Ask the individuals. And so I got a bunch of different responses, but they all boil down to the same. So then we have this meeting and I'm like, okay, so here's the problem that we wanted to address. Here are where the major issues lie. And here's where we have opportunities to change that. And everyone's like, how did you know that? You told me. Right? Now you have other problems, blah, 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 blah. But their priority and their impact is so low that we don't want to waste our money, our time, and our resources on that. Right. And so using that kind of thing in business and in life, maybe a lighter version, of course, helps put things into, I talk about perspective is power. And perspective, I work a lot on how are you looking at things and looking at perspective from a bunch of different views, right? I'm going to see this from my own eyes with my beliefs and my baggage. I'm going to see it from your eyes, hopefully, with your beliefs and your baggage. So I have to drop mine and look at, I'm going to look at it from an outsider watching us, right? And what they see between us, their views and their values. And I'm going to take it to a group level. What would a group be seeing? Because that's completely different than an outside individual. When you're done with honestly facing that, what the chaos that you're in takes on a different picture. And you're able to consciously and intellectually figure a way through rather than emotionally being involved. And it's really tough because we are emotional creatures. Energy in motion, emotion, that's who we are, right? And we're asking you to check your emotion, right? Not suppress it, just look at it from different perspectives and understand that other people bring different emotions to the table, right? So, so you mentioned your divorce, and I do want to kind of go back to that because it was one that you didn't initiate. I have two, and the last one, I was with him for 23 years. And so we were, I thought, a long time situation. And yet I'm the one who asked for the divorce. And the story behind it doesn't matter. It's what I went through that I want to talk about. Some other time we'll talk about the story. But what I went through was heartbreaking because I was divorcing a man I still loved. But I had to get out of it. And so I did go for counseling to help me navigate the confliction I felt with, I don't want to live there anymore, but I love this man, but I don't even want to walk in the door. Right. And the day of the divorce, the judge asked, is there any potential of the two of you getting back together again? He said yes. I said no. I left and I was heading back to work, bawling my eyes out. And I cried for 5 years. Right. So did that make me stronger? Getting out of that situation, getting the courage to make a change and not justifying being in a situation that was not optimal for me, right? Pushed me to a level of understanding my values and my boundaries, and that it's okay for me to have those, right? And that absolutely made me stronger. The fact that I am proud that I have values and that I can make choices that other people will say, well, I really don't think you should do that. I think that's a little scary. And me go, well, I'm not asking you for permission. I don't know where I asked you for permission. I'm just letting you know that I'm doing this, right? And in the past, I would have, gone back and said, okay, then I won't go. I won't do it, right? And been incredibly miserable. So being able to stand in your own power, to even know what your boundaries are. And women sometimes don't even know what their boundaries are because they're told what they should be. And they agree. Okay, this is for me to be a good girl. That's what I have to do.
Sure. And I don't think that's gender specific.
No.
Boys are told the same thing, just with a different lens. So the example that I often use is I was not raised to be a breadwinner. My whole life, I was raised to get my education because that was always important, and get married and have children. And I did all of those things. And I was good. I was the good girl, the good daughter. And I did all those things. But I always knew I was going to have a career. I always knew I wanted to own a business. And in this case, I've owned 2 businesses. So it's not either or. On the other hand, my 2 brothers, there was a great deal of pressure on them, less about getting married and having a family, much more about being breadwinners. And so as women, a lot of us are not raised with that thinking, and we don't develop the tools we need in order to support ourselves. I think it's better now than it used to be, but I had to make some very difficult decisions, like closing my company, when I faced a divorce and realized I was now going to be the breadwinner and was not going to have financial support from my ex-husband.
Right.
So there were a lot of difficult decisions I had to make. But one thing that sounds similar to your situation is I made those decisions. I took control of my destiny.
Yeah.
And that's very much what you're describing, is you made a very difficult decision. It has nothing to do with love.
No. And I'll tell you how this sense of worthiness translated at that time. So we're talking a long time ago. And I was working in an organization. It's the first company where I became a manager. I was not a manager. I got a call from the president. I'm firing your boss. We've got this problem, we're in trouble. And I would like you to assume that role because I've watched the programs that you've developed that are yours, that are working. Are you interested? And I said, yes. So now this is a union. So I was stepping out of being in a union into management where the managers have their own contract, 1-to-1. And I'm given the contract. The first thing I did was, comment down the side. I would like this changed. I'm not clear what you mean by this. And by the way, crossed out the dollar sign and put in the amount I knew the man was making. Right? Brought it back and said, okay, so before I accept anything, I have some questions. I want some changes. And by the way, this is what you're going to pay me. And he was shocked. Why would I pay you that much? And it's because that's what you paid him. And he failed. I'm not going to fail. The least you could do is pay me what you paid him. I would never have had what it took to have that conversation if I had not created a strong sense of boundaries for myself. Right? And so once the boundaries are up, so I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Sometimes we, male and female, fall into the trap of allowing people to cross. I have a friend, and we kind of tag team each other every once in a while with I need your advice. I need some support. And he called, and he and his wife were just at it. They're very passionate people, and sometimes it can blow up. And he said, she crossed the boundaries and she knows that's not okay with me. So I asked how and what happened and so forth. And when he was done, I said, well, this is your fault. And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, when she crossed the boundaries, you let her put up a tent and start a fire and camp out. You didn't say, whoa, honey, you just crossed the line. We need to stop and you need to step back a bit. You know that this is not okay. And then if she didn't, then say, I'll be back when you calm down. Give me 10 minutes because you need to remember this is not okay. You didn't do that. He's like, no, I didn't. I said, so she didn't cross the boundaries. You allowed her in and you allowed her to set up. And some of us do that from time to time. And they know I don't like that. Well, then you're the one who's allowing it to repeat. And taking ownership of that is also an act of getting stronger, right? When you can not only create your boundaries and find your values, but shout them from the rooftops, right? Right. So tell me some other stories of your clients, maybe your sons, how you help them in their business, with just stepping more into a more powerful position than maybe they would have.
Sure. One of the most difficult things for us as women is talking about our value. And not only do I help, not only do I help my clients embrace their value, but then how do they talk about that without sounding like they're bragging? And we have a saying, I'm based in Texas, and we have a saying here, it's not bragging if it's true. So I help my clients understand and shift the way they're thinking about what is really valuable. So for example, we all have spent our careers building a network of vetted resources, people we trust, we respect, we think highly of the work they do, but we don't often think that that's a valuable thing that we're bringing to our clients. So we don't count our network as part of our value. That seems external to us. And so when you start looking at all the different pieces that come together to create the value that you bring for your clients, it's really tremendous. And it's one thing to recognize it, it's another thing to talk about it. So through a series of exercises, I can help my clients get much more comfortable expressing the value. And I often talk about building perceived value. And what I mean by that is the the common phrase we hear out in the community is, you should get paid, quote, what you're worth, right? People should just innately understand what I'm worth and compensate me appropriately. I mean, your story about going in and demanding exactly what your predecessor was making is exactly what women in business are dealing with. We undervalue ourselves, we underprice our services, and then we wonder why people don't value us more. And part of that is people equate low quality and low price, high quality and high price. So I'm not advocating that you go out and immediately raise your prices, but I am advocating that you build a model that helps you feel much more confident when you're talking about it. And that's really what I do, is I add that structure and help people build their model. So that's one piece of really stepping into your power, being able to talk about the value that you bring, and then pricing in a way that maximizes that value. So instead of being paid, quote, what you're worth, I talk about it in terms of building value in the mind of your buyer. So if you find ideal buyers and you're sitting across from someone who is an ideal buyer for you, as you're talking with them, your responsibility is to help them understand the kinds of results that you can help them achieve. And that's why they're talking to you. But what we often do is we default to talking about our services, talking about the problem that they have and how we can help them solve it. Well, they wouldn't be talking with us if they didn't already know that.
Right.
So what can we share with that ideal buyer to help them understand that we're not like every other accountant out there. We're not like every other business advisor out there. We're going to help them in different ways, including bringing resources and tools and ideas to them to either solve the problem or take advantage of a particular opportunity. Because those are the two reasons people buy. It's either to solve a problem or grasp an opportunity. And
Exactly. Go ahead.
And understanding what it is your ideal buyer wants to achieve is super important. Not what they need, because most people who come to you won't know what they need. And I use the example of, I'm not a marketing expert. So if I go to a marketing strategist, which I have done, I know what I want. I want it to be very effective, cost effective, doesn't take a lot of my time. I want somebody to do it for me, and I want it to be so effective that it reaches certain goals.
Right.
So I know what I want, but I can't tell the marketing strategist how to do that. That's not my expertise.
Right.
Well, the people that are coming to you want your expertise. They don't know what they need, but they do know what they want. And once you can help them talk about that, then you can start sharing your value and how you can help them achieve that.
Right.
And I purposely make a distinction between an ideal buyer and an ideal client. And you may have noticed that as I was talking about that, a lot of people don't like to use the term buyer. But again, I'm a realist. And that's what that person is. They're a buyer. And you need to make sure you're talking to the decision maker, the person who actually can buy from you. A lot of times we're not, and we don't realize it as we go through our whole process and then realize this person can't make the decision anyway.
Exactly.
So,
Well, let me go and check with my wife. Let me go check with the board of directors. Let me go check. Right. You're talking to the gatekeeper.
exactly.
Right.
And I teach a whole process of how you find and how you define your ideal buyer, how you find them, how you can communicate with them, and how you can take them on this journey so that you don't get to the end and they say, oh, let me talk to my boss. right? Because then you have to work your way up the food chain.
And you're saying
So-
it's the same thing again and again and again. And it's a waste of everybody's time. It is such a time waster. So so your client are women. My ideal client, if you will, are also women, though I preface that with I have as many men, and men have the same issues as women, right? I say my client are women because I'm a woman and I can relate to them easier. And so I can write to them, blog, do whatever with ease. But I'll tell you, getting over the hurdle, and this is what makes you stronger, is facing those blocks, those I see it as change and suitcases and weights that you're dragging with you through life, facing those and unhooking them. So I'm not a shrink. I have no interest in you feeling the pain again. That's the past, and I don't want you to bring that energy forward into the present. It's the past, but we work on how do you leave it in the past? How do you love the past, appreciate the past, forgive the past, and grab that lesson so that you can move forward lighter, right? And with ease. I like ease and grace. Let's do this with ease and grace, right? And that's becoming stronger. It's not the fist in the air and we can scream. The more calm I am, the more confident I am, the more sure I am of me. That's the power. And that's the getting stronger, right? And so I face it and I get stronger because of it. And because if you don't face it, it is killing you. Holding on to stress, holding on to fear, holding on to anger, holding on to shame, holding on to guilt, all of those things, and holding on to bad decisions because it's the right thing to do is killing so many people, right? That's where you're going to have heart disease, you're going to have hardening of the arteries, you're going to have cancer, you're going to have intestinal issues, you're going to have ulcers. I had ulcers at 12. I know all about how holding things in. Like I said, I had that dream and I stopped at 12. Think about that for a second. Okay, that's where I said, okay, I'm going to bury it all because it's killing me, right? Also, it's at the age of 12. And it had nothing to do with my diet. It had everything to do with the stress that I was hanging on to at such a very young age. So, letting it go. Now, burying it, yes, it worked for a while, but I always had intestinal issues, right? Until the time that I faced the abandonment issue, faced that I actually did have relationship issues because of that, facing the fact that I had this pain that I had to release. And in facing it, it's not a confrontation. It's a loving conversation, right? With someone who raised you, although for a very short time, still raised me, right? And sharing those experiences that I remember that were loving and caring and kind. And being happy for what I did get. I have always been so good at making decisions. I had such a strong street smarts, right? All because of those experiences, including those with her. So loving that, and it just makes me stronger. And that's my hope for our listeners, that they get something from our stories and from our processes, our approach to helping clients, to helping ourselves, right? To be more than what we were yesterday because we faced something today. So, Patty, how can people get in touch with you if they want to know more about what you do?
So I'd like to offer your audience a free quiz. if you go to myrevenueroadblocks.com, you'll find a quiz that will help you determine what's blocking you, what's in your way in terms of generating more revenue. And so you're welcome to do that. And if you would like to reach out to me, please connect with me on LinkedIn. It's Patty with a Y, Patty Block, and mention this podcast so that I can connect the dots to know where you heard me. And you can also reach out to me through my website, theblockgroup.net. And there's a free white paper. You can also access the quiz there. And I have lots of free resources really targeted for women business owners. So please take advantage of those resources as well. And it's theblockgroup.net.
Awesome. I have it all written down. So this information will be in the write-up, folks. So you don't have to try to write it down and memorize it. I've got it for you. And if this resonated with you, please do let us know. If this brought something up that maybe you want to talk about, let us know about that. Maybe we'll get a chance to get back together with Patty and talk about those questions you might have. And if you know someone who might gain something from this experience, share it out with them. Like us, download us, share us, do all those lovely things. And thank you so much for your time, Gail Craft, the Empowering Process Podcast. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, Patty.
Thank you for listening to the Empowering Process Podcast. Be sure to visit Gail at gailcraft.com to learn more about how she serves thought leaders, entrepreneurs, and goal seekers. And remember, if you like this broadcast, be sure to share and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.